The entire platoon came upon their homelands from battle to see that everything had been burned down. Their spouses and children had been taken captive, and the soldiers wept and cried out. And in their anger, they decided the only thing they could do, the best thing that they could do, would be to kill their leader. But for some reason, the leader of the group took time to pray and see what the right decision was of avenging the land and gaining back all of their flocks and, most importantly, their families. And while he prayed and planned for the platoon, they rested at the brook of Besor. Besor means cheerful or happy or glad news, but there was nothing happy or cheerful that these soldiers were expecting. The leader of the soldiers finally came to the idea to avenge, but 200 of the 600 soldiers were too tired, too much in grief, too exhausted from the news, which was heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, and decided to stay back. When they returned to the Besor Valley, after winning the battle, the 200 men who were left behind came to meet the soldiers. But the soldiers who fought said, because they did not go out with us, they will not share in the plunder that we received, that they can take their children and their spouses and go back home. But the leader pleaded with them and said, this isn't right. You must not do with what the Lord has given us. God has protected us and delivered into our hands the raiding party that came against us. The share of the soldiers who stayed with the supplies is to be the same that those who went out to battle. That all share will be alike. And this shall be a statute and an ordinance for all of Israel. The story comes from 1 Samuel 30 and shows David not only acting justly, but establishing a statute for all of Israel, one of equity, generosity, and shared blessing. The brook became not just a resting place, but a dividing line between selfishness and grace. The theme of equitable sharing, even when it seems unfair, is woven throughout the Hebrew Bible. Rabbinic literature, including the Mishnah, is filled with stories of mercy over strict justice. Even the historian Josephus has recorded that when Jerusalem temple was built, that there were 18,000 people to help, and all were paid even if they only worked 1 hour. So when Matthew tells us the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, Jesus is speaking into a tradition already rich with questions of fairness, grace, and economic justice. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for their vineyard. Or as our translation that we read today says, life with God. This isn't a story about the end times, no matter how much the rapture has been talked about this last week. It's about the present. It's not about salvation in the next world, but how we live right now, how we see people, how we treat one another, and what kind of economy reflects God's heart. The landowner goes out early and hires workers for a denarius, a fair day's wage. This 1 coin was enough to feed a family for 3 to 6 meals. But throughout the day, he keeps going back to the marketplace, hiring more workers at noon, at 3, and even at 5 in the evening. But the text does not say that the work has changed, nor does the text say that the field has gotten bigger. It just says that nor does it say that they need more workers. Rather, the Greek translation shares with us these individuals were without work and unable to find it. And so out of the graciousness of their heart, this landowner invites these individuals to work in the field. Out of compassion, the landowner gives them dignity of work and security of provision. And at the end of the day, everyone was paid the same. Now, theologians have tried to assign roles to early workers are the Jews, the late ones are the Gentiles. Some say they represent the Pharisees or sinners and are outcasts. But Matthew characters, if you remember, are flat. They are not meant to evolve. They are simply what they are, workers in need of work and a landowner who keeps making space. And let's be honest, our gut reaction is to side with the early workers. Jesus, that ain't fair. How can someone who worked an hour get the same pay as someone who worked all day? We hear this parable and we are offended. And as biblical scholar Bernard Brandon Scott argues, that is the point. That the parable is designed to evoke our sympathies with the all-day workers, then poke us in the eye by offending our intuitive sense of justice. It's a deliberate offense because God's justice doesn't look like ours. It's a justice soaked in mercy. Flannery O'Connor put it well, all human nature vigorously resists grace because grace changes us and change is painful. The parable tilts our world on its axis. We think fairness means you get what you earn, but in God's economy of grace, you get what you need. And we've created a God in our image, a God who rewards hard work and protects entitlement. But the God revealed in Jesus is widely generous, uncomfortably merciful, and economically unfair in the best way possible. This parable is not just about God's grace. It is also a call to reflect that grace is how we live with one another. Just like David at the brook of Besor, Jesus invites us in a new way of seeing, not dividing people by what they've earned, but embracing the kingdom where all share alike in what God provides. I know it sounds good and all, but let's be honest, we would be really upset about this if we were the early workers. I remember as a child working in the field with my cousins picking potatoes in the grueling, hard work in Oklahoma summer. And after finishing 7 hours in the 100 and something degree work, do you know how to pick potatoes? You got to dig those boogers up. Mr. Madison handed us a $5 bill and said, split that between all of y'all. And in my heart of heart and in my mind, not out of my mouth, I thought, that ain't fair. I'm sorry, Jesus, but these economics of grace just doesn't make sense, especially if you've been told all your life about the American dream. You know, the American dream is deeply rooted in belief that anyone, regardless of their background, social class, place of birth, can achieve success, prosperity, and a better life through hard work. And at its core, it represents the idea that opportunity should be available to all, that with enough effort and hard work, individuals can rise above their circumstance. The term was popularized in 1931 by historian James Truslow Adams, who was born into a wealthy family. In his book, The Epic of America, he described it as a vision of land where life could be better and richer for everyone, regardless of birth or position. That's easy for you to say, James. Over the years, the American dream has inspired millions of immigrants to come to the U.S. in search of new beginnings. And sadly, we watch today as thousands of immigrants are being harmed. This hit home for us on Wednesday when gunshots left those injured in the ICE facility center here in Dallas. The place where many of our ministers and members have gone every Monday to protest and pray. They came here believing in a dream of something better and found themselves in the crosshairs of partisanship. And our hearts break. As Reverend Anira Kano of Fellowship Southwest stated, they were children of God and now deeply grieved by their mothers, fathers, children, and communities. Today it was them. But we must not continue to give into the schemes of hatred, greed, division, self-righteousness, bigotry, and racism. And while the dreams promise equal opportunity, the reality is that not everyone starts on equal footing and not everyone gets equal treatment. Systemic issues such as racism and poverty and unequal access to quality education and healthcare have made it much harder for some to achieve what others take for granted. In recent decades, rising income inequality, student debt, and housing costs have made this even more out of reach. It's almost as plausible as bootstrapping. Bootstrapping refers to a self-starting process that is supposed to continue to grow without external input. It's where we get the term or the line to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is physically impossible. In fact, the original meaning of the phrase was more along the lines to try to do something completely absurd and unattainable. The phrase's first known usage comes from a sarcastic 1834 account of an inventor's attempt to build a perpetual motion machine. And one writer states, maybe that says something about Americans and how they view themselves. Something that seems utterly ludicrous and impossible becomes a regular idiom for improving your life. When we think about bootstrapping and the American dream that we have been told, we start to believe it and choose it over the gospel in an era where we continue to say, me, me, me. It is hard to understand and be happy that everyone could be enough and have enough resources, food to eat, health care to be had, safety to be assured of. When we've been told by our nation from kids to look out only for ourselves. But that's everything against the gospel. The instruction from David and the command from Christ is clear. We are to live for each other. My justice, my hope, my safety, they are tied up in you. We don't do life alone, and no matter how many idioms we use, they don't change the deeper truth. We belong together. So what do we take away from this parable? It's not so much about when I started working in the field, but whether there is space in the field for everyone. It's not about making more than others, especially in a country where less than 10 people hold some of the greatest wealth in the world, but about making sure others are included in God's abundant grace. You've heard me quote Malcolm X saying, when I is replaced with we, even illness becomes wellness. It's not about me, but about we coming together. And if you have issue with that, then you have issues with God. Very simply put, God's economics is slathered in grace and mercy, and in our American eyes, that ain't fair. But let me tell you, God does not care if you think it's fair or not. God asks and God commands that the kingdom that God is bringing on earth is just that gracious field and filled with togetherness. The same kingdom that we are bringing here on earth, the same kingdom that we are trying to work hard and establish and do justice and love mercy and love kindness, the same kingdom that we are toiling and picking and working into for all of us to work in it together, to live in God's economic of grace, the same kingdom. God is asking each and all of us to work together. And I promise you, it's not as far-fetched or impossible or as absurd as picking yourself up by your bootstraps. Amen.